Imagine being so confident in your dream that you abandon everything for it. You leave your hometown, you burn your bridges, you put all your chips on the table. And then, in one cold afternoon in Vienna, a panel of judges looks at your life's work and says, "No, you're not good enough." For most people, that rejection stings. It hurts. But you move on. For Adolf Hitler, it didn't just hurt, it shattered him. And in that shattering, something far darker took root. In October 1907, 18-year-old Adolf Hitler stood outside the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna, holding his portfolio. Inside were dozens of paintings, landscapes, buildings, careful architectural sketches. He had spent months preparing for this moment. In his mind, this wasn't just an application, it was a coronation. He was certain he would be accepted. The Academy rejected him. The feedback was brutal and specific. His technical skills were adequate, but his figure drawing was weak. They told him he had more talent for architecture than fine art. They suggested he apply to the School of Architecture instead. But there was a problem. To get into architecture school, you needed a high school diploma. Hitler had dropped out. He had been so sure of his artistic genius that formal education seemed irrelevant. Now, that arrogance had locked him out of his backup plan. He applied again the next year. This time, they rejected him so quickly they didn't even let him take the entrance exam. In psychology, this is called a double rejection, being told you're not even worth evaluating. For someone with Hitler's psychology, this was catastrophic. But here's the thing. The art school rejection didn't create a monster. It revealed one that was already forming. To understand why this failure destroyed him so completely, we have to go back further. Back to a childhood that was already breaking him long before he ever picked up a paintbrush. Adolf Hitler was born in 1889 in a small Austrian town. His father, Alois, was a violent alcoholic who beat his children regularly. Adolf watched his older brother, Alois Jr., get beaten so badly he eventually ran away from home. After that, Adolf became the primary target. Child psychologists describe this kind of environment as one that produces hypervigilance and learned helplessness. You are constantly scanning for danger, but you also learn that nothing you do can stop the pain. It creates a psychology where control becomes everything, because you never had it when you needed it most. Hitler's father wanted him to become a civil servant, a respectable government worker. But Hitler despised the idea. The only person who believed in his dream of being an artist was his mother, Clara. She adored him. Some historians suggest their relationship crossed into emotional enmeshment. She didn't just support him, she enabled his delusions of grandeur. When Hitler was 18, his mother was diagnosed with terminal breast cancer. He watched her suffer through agonizing treatments. And when she finally died in December 1907, just 2 months after his first rejection from art school, Hitler was utterly alone. In the span of 8 weeks, he lost the only person who believed in him and had his life's dream destroyed. This is what psychologists call a compound trauma. One loss amplifies the other. The rejection wasn't just about art anymore. It was about worthlessness. It was about being unloved. It was about a world that had taken everything from him. And this is where the broken mind begins to rebuild itself into something dangerous. After the rejection, Hitler didn't go home. He stayed in Vienna, living in homeless shelters, selling postcards of his paintings on the street. But instead of blaming himself, he started blaming the world, and more specifically, he started blaming the people he saw as controlling that world. Vienna in the early 1900s was a breeding ground for anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. Hitler devoured them. He read pamphlets that claimed Jewish professors controlled the art schools. Jewish bankers controlled the economy. Jewish intellectuals were poisoning German culture. In psychology, this is called projection and scapegoating. When someone cannot accept their own failure, they externalize it. They find a target to carry the blame. For Hitler, Jews became the explanation for every rejection, every humiliation, every wound. But there's something even more insidious happening here. Hitler wasn't just adopting these beliefs. He was using them to construct a new identity. If the art school rejected him because of a Jewish conspiracy, then he wasn't a failure, he was a victim. And victims, in his mind, had the right to fight back. This is the psychological shift that transforms bitterness into ideology. He went from "I failed" to "I was sabotaged." And once you believe you've been sabotaged, violence stops being cruelty. It becomes justice. By 1913, Hitler had left Vienna and moved to Munich. When World War I broke out in 1914, he enlisted immediately. For the first time in his life, he had purpose. He had structure. He had a uniform that made him feel like he mattered. He served as a messenger, running communications between trenches. It was dangerous work, and he was wounded twice. He was even awarded the Iron Cross for bravery. His fellow soldiers described him as odd, obsessive, and humorless, but committed. And then, in 1918, Germany lost the war. For Hitler, this wasn't just a military defeat. It was a psychological catastrophe. Everything he had rebuilt his identity around, the idea that he was finally part of something great, collapsed. Germany was humiliated. The Treaty of Versailles stripped the country of land, money, and dignity. And once again, Hitler found himself powerless. But this time, he wasn't alone in his rage. Millions of Germans felt the same betrayal. And Hitler, with his years of obsessive reading, his hatred crystallized into ideology, and his ability to speak with absolute conviction, found his audience. In 1919, he joined a small political group that would eventually become the Nazi Party. He discovered he had a gift. He could take his personal pain, his rejection, his humiliation, his rage, and weaponize it into speeches that made entire crowds feel seen. He gave them the same thing he had given himself, a scapegoat. This is the final piece of his psychological profile. Hitler didn't just want power, he wanted vindication. He wanted to prove that the world was wrong about him, that the art school judges were wrong, that his father was wrong, that everyone who ever doubted him was wrong. And the only way to prove that, in his shattered mind, was to burn the world down and rebuild it in his image. So was Hitler broken by the art school rejection? Yes, but not in the way most people think. The rejection didn't create his hatred. It confirmed a belief he'd been building since childhood, that the world was against him, that he was special, and that his suffering gave him the right to make others suffer. The boy who was beaten by his father learned that power is the only thing that matters. The young man who lost his mother learned that love is unreliable. The failed artist who was rejected twice learned that the system is rigged. And the soldier who watched his country lose a war learned that humiliation demands revenge. Hitler's mind didn't break in one moment. It fractured over decades. The art school rejection was just the moment the cracks became visible, and the world paid the price for a broken boy who never learned to heal, only to destroy.